I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're taking a look at a remarkable book. It is called The Making of a Servant. It's written by a powerful author. His name is Sam James. It is a riveting account of a family's extraordinary leap of faith into war-torn Vietnam. You will discover the intense challenges and spiritual revelations faced by those called in to serve in the most dangerous circumstances. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Bookside Press for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Sam, great to see you here today.
Well, I'm so glad to be here.
Great having you on the show. Let me ask you a question that might strike our viewers, and that is, what do you mean by the title, The Making of a Servant?
Well, I mean by that title that God has created us and He's making us into what He wants us to be. Sometimes that can be almost anything that He would like us to be as a person. And the becoming a servant of His is very important. But what kind of servant? And He leads us to become that servant that He wants us to be. He creates us. Actually, the book was inspired in a way, and this ties into that question. Um, I was checked into a little hotel in Saigon several years ago, and this name of the hotel was the Library Alcove, and in the reception room, the whole wall was covered with books.
Hmm.
And when I checked in, they said, well, every room is named for a famous author or a famous book, classical. So they checked me into the Alice in Wonderland room. And there was a painting on the wall that showed Alice walking down a wooden path. And she came to that path and she didn't know what to do. And she asked this Cheshire cat sitting up in a tree, I don't know which fork to take. And he said, where are you going? And she said, I don't know. He said, then it doesn't matter which fork you take. Well, I thought about that almost all night. I couldn't go to sleep. And I came to the conclusion that it makes a lot of difference if you don't want to spend the rest of your life wishing you'd taken the other fork.
Yeah.
So then that led me to looking at all the forks in the road and how God took me as a young boy, a small boy, and made me into what He wanted us to be, me to be. And I was reading in Jeremiah where Jeremiah is told to go down to the potter's house. He's going to make a vessel. And and he went down there. He said, I have a message for you. And the potter was making this vessel, but he didn't like what it was turning into. So he broke it apart and remade it into what he wanted. And God said to him, as clay is in the potter's hands, so are you in my hands. And so He brings about all these experiences and exposures and everything that we have to make us into that vessel that He can use. That's the making of a servant. And I did break the book down into four parts. One is, to make a vessel, you've got to prepare the clay. And preparing the clay is like childhood when we're preparing ourselves for adult life. And then the vessel has to be formed. And that's the education and the making of who we are early in our adult life. And then He has to fill that vessel. And that's as we go out into our work and everything, we're filling that vessel with all of our education experiences and so forth. And there inevitably comes a time when that vessel is broken.
Hmm.
Maybe it's divorce, maybe it's loss of something, but we have to remake ourselves into something. And we can either let that brokenness either break us and make us like a cancer eating away at our soul. We become angry, we don't want to do anything, whatever. Or it can make us more beautiful than we ever thought we could be because we are remade. God has remade us into something far more beautiful than we had before. If we process that experience, go through all of those decisions, and come out on the other side a new person. And that's what I mean by making a servant.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tell me what inspired your family to move to Vietnam despite the obvious dangers.
Well, it was the call of God. I think He prepared us for that. My wife was a nurse practitioner, and
Mhm.
she wanted to go to the mission field as a nurse. And I married her because I got out of the Navy. I was a new Christian, and
Mhm.
I just was so filled with the gospel, and I wanted everybody to know about the gospel. And I thought, do I want to go to a place where everybody already knows, they got television, everything? Or do I want to go a place where it's very difficult, where
Mhm.
people don't know who Jesus is? And that's where I want to put my life. So my ship had gone down to Vietnam to guarantee refugees fleeing from the North in 1954. And we were guaranteed their security. And I looked out over that land and I said, this may be where God wants me to come
Mhm.
to put my life here, to love the Vietnamese people, and to show them what God's love is like through my life. And
Mhm.
so I chose Vietnam. Before the war ever started, it was a black cloud on the horizon only, but I just felt compelled to go to Vietnam. My wife felt that with me. And so we signed up and said, let us go to Vietnam. And of course, they said, well, you know, it's going to be dangerous there. It's going to be war. Are you sure you want to do this? I said, this is what God made me to do. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
My heart yearns for this. And I don't care about the war. What I want to do is to be the presence of Christ in the middle of a very difficult situation of people. And that led me to choose Vietnam.
Amazing, amazing. You faced death three times.
Yes, yes.
How did those encounters affect your spiritual journey, your beliefs, and do you feel God was looking out for you, protecting you?
Oh, I think he was definitely looking out and protecting me. Sometimes I feel a little guilty because there were others that who died, you know. But God made it possible for me to live because He wanted to use my life down through the years.
Mhm.
And the first time I was almost killed, I won't go into the whole story, but the 91st Psalm came to my mind. He that dwells in the shadow of the Almighty, he that dwells in the shadow of the Almighty will, well, I can't call it
Yeah.
right now, but the fifth verse of that says, and you will not be afraid
Mhm.
of the night, of pestilence, all those kind of things. Well, I was very afraid at that point. And when I acknowledged that God's will is perfect and whatever He wants to do with me is perfect, it's His will, and it's my life that I've given to Him. And I got the greatest peace. And it caused me to be able to think how to get out of that situation. And just as I got out of there, there were like 14 bodies in the road. All
Mhm.
the Everything was burned. And I would have been sitting right there had God not given me that perfect peace that
Amazing.
passes all understanding. And that made me be able to think so that I took the action that saved my life.
Amazing. Tell me about writing this book. What was it like writing it? How long were you in Vietnam? And what do you hope readers take away from the book?
Well, I was there for 14 years uninterrupted. I raised my whole family there. My children were raised in Vietnam. They all speak Vietnamese fluently. I do all my teaching in Vietnamese and everything
Mhm.
else in Vietnamese. So it's my language. When we had to leave in 1975, of course, I left at the last minute in a big hurry to get out of there. And and later, when 14 years later, they began to open up to tourists again. And I just got one of the first visas to go back into Vietnam.
Mm.
They asked me while I was there, do you mind if we haven't had any teaching whatsoever since 1975 when Vietnam collapsed? Could you come back occasionally and teach us? And we'll arrange places for you to teach. And I have to say that they gave me some very good hidden places, as it
Mm.
were, where I could teach. And for 17 years, I taught in those places. Arrested once and interrogated once. And God brought me through all of that so that I was able to found the seminary in Vietnam.
Amazing. What was it like writing about this experience for you?
Oh, I would write and cry. I relived every experience in that book from my childhood all the way through. And I saw the forks in the road that I could have taken, but I kept the one fork which God intended for me. Somehow I knew that's fork is what I want to go. Other things were very tempting, but not that. I wanted that way that God directed me. And so I went through all of these forks in the road, made the right choices, and that took me to where God wanted me and made me the servant that He wanted me to be there. And
Amazing.
one night in a dream, not a dream, one night I'd been through some very, very difficult circumstances in the war. And I was really tempted to leave and take my family back to the States. I just had almost given up. So many things had happened. And I knelt in my living room and prayed. And the Lord welled up in me what He wanted me to hear. It wasn't a spoken voice or anything. He said, "My son, you're not in Vietnam because you love the Vietnamese people. You're there because I love them. And I want to love them through you."
Mm.
And I just prostrated myself on the floor and said, "Lord, here I am. Empty me out and fill me with your presence so that I can be what you want me to be here and flow that love through my life." And from that point on, I was committed through the whole war and stayed and then went back and taught underground many, many years and many, many months, years actually.
Yeah.
And that's what so when I wrote the book, I wrote through all of those experiences, and I would cry and I would write, and I
Mm.
would cry and I would write,
Yeah.
and that's how the book came into being.
Well, it's very touching. It's very spiritual. It's very faith affirming, this book. The sacrifices you made to live your life overseas, to work as a servant of God and of the people of Vietnam, the people He loved. And this book is a work of love. It is called The Making of a Servant by Sam James. It is a very riveting account of his family's extraordinary leap of faith into war-torn Vietnam. Sam, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the privilege of being here. And I pray that as people read that book, perhaps God will begin to make them into that servant that He wants them to be.
Amen. God bless you, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for letting me. All right.
Absolutely. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on
All right.
Spotlight.